community engagement or consultation, and look to support them to the extent that we can. In this case, it sounds to staff like a facilitated conversation about opportunities to improve the project plan between the area residents and the proponent could be helpful, and we would look at it as a constructive opportunity to better align the project with everyone's needs. If that revealed that there was a larger scale consultation process required, I think we would have to talk to the proponent about their capacity to do that, and perhaps return with additional project information. I hesitate to commit to a particular process without sitting down with folks, and SCRD's capacity to undertake something like this it's just not there for 2021. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I apologize for doing things on the fly, because that's always awkward, and clearly, we don't have the full information. So I'm happy with the motion as it stands, but we don't want to make any further decisions at this time. Thanks.
Okay, Director Seegers.
Thank you. So the motion basically is to refer this material to staff to consider when coming forward. So this would be a process question for staff around this. The MOU that they're working on right now, will that be coming back to the board for approval prior to signing?
GM Hall.
Thank you. The board resolution that the superintendent mentioned provides authorization to enter into an agreement between us and the Living Heritage Society regarding the long-term care and maintenance of the new access trail. So I think if the scope of the agreement that we're entering into extends beyond what the board has directed, then yes, we would need to bring it back. But if we're just adjusting the parameters of what is within that scope, then we have your direction to proceed. Thank you.
So would you consider that the dock is included in that? Or would that be beyond the scope of what has been directed at this point?
The dock is subject to provincial authorization. It's not actually in our park.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is this information is going to staff to help inform that conversation, but it wouldn't necessarily at this point come back to the board.
Not, I share your understanding, Director, but staff are sensitive to the scope of what has been authorized here. And so should the scope change, then yes, staff would return. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so directors know what the process is at this point and need to decide what they want to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Ties.
I just want to clarify whether the existing motion is only to staff and does not include any kind of dialogue with the Living Heritage Society, or whether we need to add that as a part of the motion, or if that's included. So maybe staff can clarify whether that can just be implied, or whether that's an additional motion is needed for that.
Well, the current motion on the floor is to just refer this material to staff as part of their process. So beyond that is going to be if any of the directors want to make a motion beyond that. I would think. I mean, staff are going to do what we ask them to do. That being said, staff are in fairly constant contact with the Living Heritage Society as they work through this. So, Director Ties.
Yeah, I mean, if if staff thinks that it might help is that we might want to add an and that staff consult with the Living Heritage Society regarding the feedback.
Okay. GM Hall, would that is that necessary, and would that benefit staff?
Staff appreciate the extra clarity. Thank you.
Okay. Was that an amendment, Director Ties?
Sure, I'll make that amendment.
All right. Do I have a seconder for it? Okay. I have that on the floor. That's been seconded. Thank you. Any other comments, questions, statements, speakers list? Director Hiltz, I see you looking around there. Go ahead.
Yeah, just the the language of the amendment. I didn't quite hear it all.
And that, sorry, Director Ties, did you want to repeat that?
And that staff engage with Pender, the Harbour Living Heritage Society regarding this feedback, or consult with, I think maybe recording secretary might have a better idea.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have that staff consult with the Pender Harbour Living Heritage Society regarding community feedback received.
Okay. Director Lee?
Yes, I just wanted to let the other directors know that the wharf that's being proposed at Hotel Lake is subject to increased scrutiny by FLNRO because it's in an application only zone. So it'll have to get all the same approvals that what happens in the ocean. And so it will be well regulated by the provincial government, who is responsible for this, not us. So I'm not sure that we are even meddling in our own business here. So it's kind of a weird situation we find ourselves in.
Thank you, Director Lee. Director Pratt?
Thank you. And thank you for reminding us of that, Director Lee, because as I've been sitting here, we're not actually the approving body for the ramp or for the dock itself. So anything we do here might be moot anyways. So I don't think it's, I think what I would do is, do we have is the provincial referral already up online? Oh, sorry. And I know we have an amendment on the floor too, so this isn't really germane to that. So I should really stop talking.
It's really, it's hardly even germane to the motion that we're trying to amend too, but yeah. Okay. I don't see any other speakers. I'm going to call the question on the amendment, and then we can broaden the discussion a little bit. So, rural directors, regional parks, all those in favor of the amendment? I see 4 in favor. Opposed? Director Lee, my apologies, I didn't see your hand. Were you in favor or opposed?
I'm just listening.
Okay, well, if you don't raise a hand one way or the other, you are voting in the affirmative. So, okay. So we do have an amended motion on the floor. Director Pratt, did you want to try again on that, the comment there?
Well, I don't want to pontificate for too long because we're certainly spending a lot of time, and I do know that this has, as Director Lee has said, that it has been out there in the community for a while. What our motion does essentially is just it sends the delegation materials to staff as part of their conversation, and asks staff to also review it with the Living Heritage Society. That's my understanding as part of going forward. So I'm actually okay with how that is. I don't think, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't sound like we're creating a lot of work for something that we're not essentially the approving body for. But I think having additional material as part of to round out a conversation is good. So I just leave it there. I think I will vote in support of that, and just would like to move it forward unless I would just suggest we call the question unless anybody else is more.
I don't have a speakers list. So if that's it, Director Pratt, I will call the question on the amended motion. All those in favor? Okay. And okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. So that's been carried. Thank you to our delegation. Thank you, directors, for your patience as we work through this. And with that, thank you, Mr. Knight, for being here today. And
welcome.
Have a good rest of your day. Enjoy the sun. All right. Moving on to item number 3 in our agenda. On applying online accommodation platform funds, plan for housing coordinator. I understand GM Hall is going to be speaking to this.
Thank you, Chair. So staff are following direction from the April 22nd board meeting, where we were directed to take some action and also to report back at this meeting on the status of advancing a plan to apply or make use of the funds provided through the MRDT online accommodation platform program. And since that meeting, staff have put together a plan with input from the Housing Action Table through a representative that includes collaboration with that group and revolves around the focus that was discussed with the board a few weeks ago about creating through a contract with an agency or an individual a regional housing coordinator position. And so that plan has now been submitted to Sunshine Coast Tourism for vetting through to Destination BC, and we await their response. And as recently as this morning, I spoke with the rep from the Housing Action Table about readiness to proceed with together on some sort of request for proposal type document once we get word back from Sunshine Coast Tourism. So we're well placed to take action once we hear back. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, GM Hall. So this is a verbal update. Just this is where we're at. You're not looking for any specific directions from us today. Director Seegers.
I just want to say thank you to staff. I know that you've been focused on this. You're turning around quickly, and we really appreciate the effort and the time you're putting in.
Agreed. It's a very important issue. So thank you. All right. Any other questions from directors? I don't see any hands. So we will move on to Annex B, item number 4 in our agenda, zoning amendment bylaw number 310.192/2020 for 2284 Pixton Road. Just let me bring up my agenda here. Who is speaking to this? This is Mr. Sayao. Good morning.
Just before we do that, Chair, if Manager Patey could give a brief intro, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Oh, my apologies. I did not see the hand. Go ahead, Mr. Patey.
Thanks so much, Chair. A staff report was provided to the PCD in April and preceded by workshops with the directors on March 8th and 15th, which identified a number of procedural improvements to facilitate increased planning capacity, better alignment with legislation and bylaws, and improved customer service and preparation for future planning work. Improvements include subtle changes to the way development variance permits, bylaw amendments, and Crown referrals are managed. Today, we have 1 rezoning application and 3 DVPs before the committee, which implement the new process. The amending bylaw for the Pixton Road application is being presented for first and second reading today. For the DVP applications, notification was provided in accordance with the Local Government Act. And as provided in the options sections of each of the staff reports, the committee can determine if the proposal warrants input from the advisory planning commissions. If the committee chooses this option, the staff report and comments received as a result of the notification will be provided for their review and recommendation. The applications would then return to the PCD at their next meeting. As part of this implementation of procedural improvements, staff have also been continually working on areas of the website to bring greater clarity to the process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Patey. Mr. Seau, your turn.
Thank you, Chair. So this proposal is a site-specific amendment to the zoning bylaw to allow a second dwelling on this property in the CR2 zone. The proposed second dwelling will be limited to 130 square meters in floor area and 7 meters in height, setback more than 15 meters from any lot line, and will not allow to have any short-term rental. Based on analysis of this report, the proposal is technically feasible and does not appear to have a negative impact on infrastructure, transportation, environment, or the rural ambience of the area. The proposed change to the zoning bylaw could support the creation of an affordable housing option for the property owner and facilitate a site-specific, limited, and incremental land use change in this area. This report also recognizes and addresses public perception and concerns of the proposal through the preliminary consultation process. However, based on the analysis of the report, there is merit for this proposal to be further considered through the public hearing process. So staff recommend that the bylaws proceed to first and second readings and a public hearing to be arranged to gather further community input. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Director Ties.
All right, I have a little bit of a, this is not an easy file, as it seems all Roberts Creek files are never an easy file, but this application, or substantially the same application, started about almost 2 years ago now, and a public information meeting was held, which I attended, and it turned into a bit of an impromptu public hearing. So I do have, and I also have received multiple emails and letters from all the residents along Pixton Road who are largely against this application. Some of the reasons are that the CR2 zoning was created specifically for this area right there. And the reason why they created the CR2 zoning was to enable some people to pay for the upgrading of Pixton Road, which they had to privately pay for by being able to subdivide their 10-acre lots into 2 5-acre lots and selling off half of it, under the condition that no more density is added to those lots, so only one dwelling is allowed. So currently, Pixton Road is classified as 8F by the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, which means it is unmaintained, and it is up to the residents of Pixton Road to actually maintain that road. The biggest concern I have about this application is that essentially it will set a precedent for creating more density in an area where ultimately the CR2 zoning was created and on an unmaintained road. And I'm wondering as to how much more density is needed for Moti to actually start maintaining the road. And considering that most of the neighbors are against it and all the residents on Pixton Road, I do question whether it's a good idea to let this application go through, considering that they're the ones, the greater Pixton community is the ones that need to be the ones maintaining the road. And so extra density, if they're not in approval of it, may not be a fair decision. But that being said, I might be interested to have this go through to a public hearing if staff can also check with MOTI and give us a little bit more clarity on what kind of density would be required for them to start maintaining this road, because that may in fact swing things in the favor of this application. Currently, if they're not willing to maintain the road and the neighbors aren't willing to maintain the road with that extra added density, then I do have my questions around this application and whether it should go through. Not to mention the history where a lot of the residents on Pixton Road were adamant that no extra density should be added because that was part of the deal of this CR2 zoning. So I'm happy to take some more questions and comments from directors, please.
All right, thank you, Director Ties. Just before I move to the next speaker, I'm going to ask staff, and they may not have an answer for us. Do we have any idea on what it takes for MOTI to upgrade the classification of a road in terms of the density requirements? Mr. Seau?
Yes, thanks, Chair. So staff have consulted with the ministry. So the ministry does not have a definitive a trigger or a density that would trigger a road improvement, so to speak. For example, they don't have something like, if you subdivide 10 lots or build 20 more houses, then you have to improve the road. It's not like that. So, but generally speaking, the ministry will have to look at the size of the development potential, land use, road network, traffic patterns, connectivity in the surrounding area, as well as safety, such as sightline, grade, history of accident, and so forth. So in a complex situation, a traffic study may be required in order to determine road improvement criteria and what density it could support. But for this case, the ministry has determined that the Pixton Road development does not require road improvement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I have a lot of, longstanding concerns about increasing density in unserviced areas. And this is another example, and there's a number of things on our agendas upcoming where we are making decisions on a one-off basis when there is no regional growth strategy in place. And I am very reluctant to support increased density in these kind of areas until we have a regional growth strategy that clarifies where we want to put density on the Sunshine Coast. Areas without improved roads, without water service, etc., do not, to my mind, warrant priority for increased density. We should probably be focusing it elsewhere. But back to, we need a regional growth strategy. Thank you.
Which is slowly starting and will likely take several years to actually reach completion. Director Hiltz?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, the question I have is about how it's an ADEF road, which no provincial maintenance. So how do the neighbors coordinate maintenance, or is it coordinated? Do they pick up funds? How do they do anything like this, or is it just like totally ad hoc?
Director Ties, I think you've got the answer to that question, don't you?
Yeah, last time I consulted is one person in the neighborhood goes and calls Capilano Highway Services and begs and pleads for them to grade the road once a year. And Capilano Highway Services has so far out of the kindness of their heart, apparently done it. But there is actually no agreement in place to, and no neighborhood cohesiveness or any kind of organization to actually do that in a structured way. So that's the information I have.
It's an interesting perspective because I've got family with property up in Pender Harbor, and they're on a private road, and so they have a strata that's formed. The fees are minimal, but that strata is only there to maintain the road. But being a public roadway, you shouldn't have to form a strata to pay to maintain that public roadway. Director Lee?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm curious how the subdivision got approved without a road built to Modi standards. Is that something that happened long time ago or something?
Director Ties, do you have the history on that, or?
Unless staff corrects me, I do believe Pixton was upgraded to Modi standards, and that was part of the reason why they allowed the subdivision and the CR2 zoning. This didn't happen too long ago, like 10 to 15 years ago. So, but the maintenance in the meantime has been the responsibility of the people, and Modi standards may have changed in the meantime as well. Again, so if they were to start maintaining it, the neighbors might have to chip in again to bring it up to the new Modi standards. I have no idea, but as far as I know, it's actually not that long ago that this was done, and Pixton was brought up to Modi standards as part of the subdivision process, but they are still responsible for maintaining it.
Okay, thank you. And I don't see any staff waving their hands or jumping up and down, so I think that your answer was sufficient. Director Hiltz.
I can bring the Area F response. There are subdivisions throughout the islands that are 8F roads. The most recent one I can think of is Furcum, which is 75 lots approved by Modi, all F8 roads. So yeah, Modi does approve subdivisions for 8F roads. Happens on the islands. Wherever you don't have good road access, it seems like that's what the strategy.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Modi must have some sort of a standard before they'll take over a road then when there's a subdivision. Kind of a curious thing. I know I've seen subdivisions where they've put a road to Modi standards, paved it, and then Modi has agreed to look after it. So it's kind of, I wasn't aware that you could do an 8F road and still have a subdivision and have it unmaintained, but what the heck. My other question though is, when would we normally refer something like this to our APCs? Or would we normally refer something like this? In the past, would we have referred, I guess is the right way to put that one.
That's a great question. Mr. Seo?
Thank you, Chair. So if you're referring to a rezoning application, yes, we always refer the application to the APC, including this one. Thank you.
Okay. I think Director Lee's question was more sort of where in the process do we refer this to APC?
We refer to the APC at the same time we conduct the preliminary public consultation. And also at the same time, we refer the application to all the other agencies before the first and second reading of the bylaws.
Okay. Thank you. Director Lee, did you have a follow-up to that, or?
Yeah, I thought we'd had the proponent had actually had a public meeting already, though, from what Director Ties had said. So has this already been to the APC?
Thank you. Yes, it has been to the APC. That public meeting you referred to was for the previous application that was subsequently canceled by the applicant after the public information meeting. So the application we are discussing today is the It's a new application. It's the second application. Yeah, it has been referred to the APC.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
When somebody buys a property, they look at the zoning, and then I think they have, you know, some reason to consider that the zoning will be adhered to. So when we're making exceptions to zoning or amending the zoning, there should be a pretty strong reason for doing so, I would think. And especially in the light of the neighbors being opposed to this, I have a hard time, and the fact that there's already been, you know, consultation, it's gone to the APC. I have a hard time seeing the benefit in taking this to a public hearing.
Thank you, Director McMahon. As our speakers list winds down, I'm hoping that somebody will make a motion. Director Ties?
Yeah, so I'm sort of two minds on this. Personally, I am against approving this at this point in time, but we haven't really formally received public feedback yet. I have informal public feedback from pretty much everybody. But if we want to follow due process and make it part of the record, I do wonder whether we should take it to public hearing. I keeping in mind that I also don't want to waste staff's time and the director's time. But just for due process, I do wonder if a public hearing should be held, just so that we can state it for the record. But the reasons, I mean, I've outlined some of the reasons as to why it shouldn't go ahead. It also contravenes our OCP section 17.15.2, which says that the property zone CR2, which is just that specific area, shall have no more than one dwelling. And then you've heard all my other concerns as well. While we do want some more density in the creek in some areas, this is not necessarily the area to add density on an ad hoc basis. So I could support that application if the whole neighborhood were to maybe go ask for a rezoning of the CR from the CR2 to maybe just a normal country residential rating. And so if neighborhood support was there, but seeing as there isn't, I'm inclined to go against it. But I'd like to hear from some of the directors whether they feel like due process should be followed and a public hearing should be held, or whether we should just deny this application.
Thank you, Director Ties. Just before I go to my next speaker, I will comment that, you know, whether we go to a public hearing on this or whether it's denied right now, or recommended to be denied right now, is a purely political decision. You know, our staff will do as we request of them. Public hearings are, you know, pretty standard procedures and pretty straightforward affairs for staff to pull together. So if that's the route that the directors would feel more comfortable, then that's the route that we should go, even if in the end it is denied. Director Lee?
Thank you, Chair. My initial take is that I think it should go to the public hearing. It is due process, and we should hear from everybody that is concerned. And it does formalize the process, and it doesn't. It's not really that onerous to do it. So, if I am thinking that we should carry forward with this.
Thank you. Director McMahon?
Yeah, I'm hardly going to say that we should not do public process. And I take Director Ties' point about having the public feedback on the record properly.
Thank you. Director Pratt?
Well, I won't pontificate any further, and I'll just move the recommendations on page 3. And do we have, I'm sorry, do we have a date set for the, what date is the public hearing set for?
We also don't have directors to chair and alternate chair the public hearing yet.
Yeah, but that would depend on the date that's been proposed.
Do staff have a date in mind?
Thank you for the question, Chair. The date would be scheduled based on the availability of the recommended chair for the hearing, and we would ensure that we follow the notice requirements and notification requirements for a public hearing in promoting the date. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm not going to volunteer to be chair or alternate chair, but I would happily move and volunteer any one of my other rural directors or municipal directors.
I will throw it out there that unless somebody really, really, really wants to do the job, I am willing to chair it. Being a municipal director, I don't get a vote in this. I don't have much of a say in it. So unless somebody else really, really wants to do it. But Director Ties?
Yeah, I was going to volunteer myself as vice chair, as is the custom.
Okay.
Well,
so
then
go ahead.
I'll make those recommendations that Director Toth be delegated as the chair and Director Ties be delegated as the alternate chair for the public hearing.
Okay, and I see that rapidly seconded by Director McMahon. So this is rural planning. So this is A, B, D, E, and F. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor of the recommendations? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. All right. Moving on to Annex C. In our agenda, item 5, frontage waiver application FRW 00009 for 13104 Oyster Bay Road. And back to Mr. Sao.
Thank you, Jess. So this is frontage waiver is to facilitate a 2-lot subdivision on 13104 Oyster Bay Road in the Edmund Pender Harbor electoral area. So the frontage of the parent parcel is already less than 10% of the parameter of the parcel. In order to have a driveway access to Oyster Bay Road, each new parcel will need to have a frontage on Oyster Bay Road that is less than 10% of the parameter of the parcel, requiring a frontage waiver. The proposed narrow frontage can accommodate the septic fields and the driveways in this area. The Ministry of Transportation has no concern with the lot layout and has issued a preliminary layout approval for the proposed subdivision. So staff consider that frontage waiver is reasonable and recommend approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Yuli. Just before I go to speakers list, I'm going to use Chair's prerogative to ask the first question. On page 15 shows the sort of lot layout diagram. And to the other side of the proposed road extension, there is that part of lot A. And I was just wondering if that is a fairly standard happenstance where we end up with these little orphan chunks of land within the rural areas.
Yes, that's correct. That will be part of the Hope parcel that is connected to one of the new lots. So because the road has to punch through the lot in order to provide the access, so that will be covenant required for this small piece of land to have no sewage generating uses and no residential uses.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Director Lee.
Yes, thank you. I was just wondering, do these things ever go to the APC? I don't remember ever having any of them go there. I was just wondering if we ever do send these there.
Thank you, Jess. So because the technical nature of the subdivision and because it's very small in scale, this type of frontage waiver usually not referred to the APC.
Yes, thank you. And I believe the reason for the 10% so that there isn't too many roads, too many roads and too short of a distance exiting onto a main highway. But in this case, this is not a main highway. This is a very lightly traveled road. So I'd like to propose that we accept the recommendation as listed on page 13.
All right, and I see a seconder for that. Thank you very much. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question for rural planning. All those in favor? All right, that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. So moving on to Annex D, Development Variance Permit DVP 00070 for 980 Joe Road. Just before we turn it over to staff, I do want to acknowledge that we do have a new planner with us. He'll be presenting this, and I believe the next couple DVPs as well. So thank you, Mr. Copes, and welcome to the organization.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The purpose of this development variance permit application is to reduce the rear parcel line setback to facilitate the construction of a master bedroom addition. The proposed location is required due to the existing roof line and the deck on the south side of the house. Notifications were distributed to neighboring properties and no comments have been received to date. Staff recommend issuance of this permit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just before I go to questions, having heard staff's introduction of the proposed development variance permit, if there is anybody in the webinar audience wishing to speak to the application, we ask that you raise your hand using the raise hand tool, and I will unmute you in the order of hands raised. When you speak, I'll ask you to please give your full name and address for the record. I'll ask you to please keep your comments focused and to limit them to 3 minutes. Once the committee has heard from all those wishing to speak, we will then proceed with a motion and discussion towards recommendations to the board. So having said that, is there anybody in the webinar attendees list who would like to speak? This is a little bit of a new process for us, so please bear with me while we work through this. I do not see any hands raised, so now I will move to my directors. Any questions from directors? Director Ties.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, I just wanted to clarify in the report on page 18, it says the applicant notes that the neighbor has expressed support to him for the variance. You did mention that letters had been sent out, and I'm guessing that includes that neighbor that is most directly affected. I just want to ensure that is there any other way that he has voiced support other than by not sending a letter?
Thank you. Staff, have we heard any specific directed correspondence from the neighbor?
Thank you, Chair. We did not receive any letters in regards to this application.
All right, thank you. So nothing in favor, nothing opposed. Director Ties.
Well, I'm willing to move the recommendations as listed on page 16.
Thank you, and I have a seconder for that. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question for my rural directors. All those in favor? Thank you, that's carried. Moving on to Annex E, Development Variance Permit DVP 00071 for 3698 Beach Avenue. And back to Mr. Copes.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this development variance permit application is to increase the maximum permitted floor area of auxiliary buildings to facilitate the construction of a 2-story building containing a garage and a gym. One comment was received in relation to the removal of trees, loss of green space, and lack of privacy. The applicant has noted that the proposal is the best solution based on the characteristics of the site, and the proposed location would conform to zoning bylaw setbacks. Staff recommend issuance of the permit subject to issuance of a demolition permit of the existing garage.
All right, thank you for that. Having heard staff's introduction of the proposed development variance permit, If there is anybody in the webinar audience wishing to speak to the application, we ask that you raise your hand using the raise hand tool, and I will unmute you in the order of hands raised. When you speak, I'll ask you please give your full name and address for the record. I'll ask you to please keep your comments focused and to limit them to 3 minutes. Once committee has heard from all those wishing to speak, we will proceed with a motion and discussion towards a recommendation to the board. So I do see a hand up in the attendees list. I have given them permission to speak, but they will need to unmute themselves.
Good morning. Am I on the air here?
Yes, you are. Full name and address, please.
Oh, yes, thank you. My name is Al Howrico, and I'm the owner and resident at 1379 Park Avenue. So my property line is adjacent to Matt and Sarah's at 3698 Beach Avenue.
Okay, go ahead if you've got comments to make.
Thank you. Yes, I simply have a question and a concern about the final site location and on the issue of privacy. But first of all, I'd like to say that I do support the project very much with Matt Elliott and Sarah, and wish them every success with the project. Of course, all the properties in our vicinity are in a forested area of mature, tall cedar and fir trees, and we all enjoy a very park-like privacy between properties. And at various points, these trees might straddle either side of the property lines and not necessarily always both. Now, on page 5 of the staff report, the area shown in the photograph of the proposed building site certainly appears to be the best and the most appropriate location for the building. The trees on the left side of that photo depict the beginning of the greenbelt trees between our properties. And also on page 5, under discussion at the bottom of the page, the applicant's rationale here, and of course, Matt Elliott is understanding and sensitive to the privacy issue. And there's a quote in there that the building location would not be visible to neighbors. And so my question centers more on the diagram on page 3, which is the site plan and the area of variance. And in some discussion with the district, I'm still somewhat perplexed and ambivalent about what we see here. The northwest end of the proposed building would sit right on the 1.5 meter setback as it abuts my property. I thought that there's the more familiar 2 meters, but this is 1.5, and as measured from the base of the walls. And I also understand that the roof overhang soffit is permitted a further setback into that space by an additional 50%, which results in the roof overhang being 0.75 of a meter, or less than 2.5 feet from the actual property line. And so that the trees that are shown on page 5 would presumably need to be removed for the building to stand here, according to page 3 of the site plan. So I need to point out that on my side of the property line, there are not sufficient trees to provide privacy at this location, with the estimated height of the building being approximately 24 feet. And immediately on my side of the property line, I have a swimming pool, a sun deck, a hot tub, a groomed back lawn area, and of course, all the windows of the rear of my house would be directly facing this area. So my concern is that if the building is built right on this 1.5 meter line, and with the trees necessarily needing to be removed to facilitate its location there, that the building may be exposed to my property by being too close to the line, with insufficient greenbelt to maintain privacy. However, back to page 5, it looks as though the view from here and the rationale indicates that it would be private and would be to mutual satisfaction. So once again, thank you, and I do support Matt Elliott and Sarah's project, and I'm just got my fingers crossed that what we see on page 5 will prevail. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much for your comments. Is there anybody else in the gallery who would like to speak to this before I go to my directors? I do note that we have a number of, yes, thank you very much. I have given you permission to unmute. You will need to unmute yourself though in order to speak.
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you. Name,
okay.
name and address.
Yes. So this is Matt Elliott. I'm the applicant. Are you there?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, so I'm the applicant there, and first of all, I'd like to thank Al for calling in. It is worth noting that we didn't plan on having windows in that building in the back that would be facing his property. Like in the upstairs, which would affect his privacy. And so his privacy should be maintained that way.
Okay.
Because I understand his comments about his pool and his hot tub in his backyard. Everyone in our area, we like the fact that it's park-like, like he mentioned, and we certainly intend to keep it that way.
Okay. If that's all, thank you for your comments.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I do not see further hands up. So, directors. Director Ties, I think I had seen. Yes, go ahead, Director Ties.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for this application, and thanks for the opportunity for the applicant and both the neighbor to speak. This is the kind of stuff that the APC loves to sink its teeth into. Just and I think there are a few APC members who've been who are fairly new on my APC, and I would like to just for those reasons refer the application to the Area D APC, which is option 2 on page 28. So I would like to I believe the recommendation would be that the report, so it's been received, be issued subject to a demolition permit being issued, comments from the Shishal Nation be addressed, and a referral to the APC be done.
Now, Director Ties, if you move that motion as is, they will it will be referred to the APC and then proceed. Is that your intention, or would you like to refer it to the APC and have it come back to us for final approval?
I believe I think it would suffice for us to get the APC comments by the time it reaches board, and at that point we can. If there's any APC comments that need to be incorporated, we can probably consider them at that point. Does that sound good for everyone?
I'm going to ask staff if that sounds reasonable, or if we should be taking this one step at a time from a process perspective. Who would like to speak to that? GM Hall?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Staff hadn't considered that option. I think appreciating that this is a new process, staff would recommend that we take this step by step and that this return to a committee, just to ensure that we follow good process, and also give our not only give my colleagues time to get this onto the APC agenda, but ensure that we give our APC time to consider this as part of their regularly scheduled meeting. And staff will consider the director's process suggestion, so that should that be of interest for future applications, we are in a position to offer more process support. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, as GM Hall indicated, this is an evolving process. So, Director Seegers?
Thank you. So this is counter to what staff have come forward with regards to the process improvements that they're looking at doing. And I understand that Director Tives has new members on his APC. Is this for their input or for their information when it goes to APC at this point?
Thank you. Director Tives.
I think I would like their input, as well as I think some of the new members should get some familiarization with things like setbacks and minimum lot sizes and things like that. So, or minimum, was it combined gross floor area and all that, all those kind of requirements. And I think this would be a good one for them to work through.
Okay. So having heard staff feedback, I will put you on the spot, Director Tives. Would you like to make a motion?
Everyone knows how great I am at making motions on the floor, but I guess I will just make the motion that this be referred to the area DAPC and come back to a future committee meeting.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? I see a seconder for that. Thank you very much. I don't see a speakers list for this, so I will call the question. Rural planning, A, B, D, E, and F. All those in favor? All right, that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex. Oh, and thank you to our residents for participating today. Moving on to Annex F. Oh,
can I ask a question before we move on?
Sure.
This process is different from the municipal process, and I'm just interested now. When you refer this now to the APC, you're going to have to give notice again to the area residents of consideration of the variance when it comes back. Is that not correct?
Mr. Beatty?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Additional notification isn't required by legislation if we refer the matter to the APC. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, because your referrals are in advance of consideration of the variance, whereas our referrals at the municipal level are to the word of the variance process, which is where we intend to issue a variance. We will then consult, as opposed to you've consulted prior to the consideration, which is an interesting process, and one I have to think through, because we had one the other night where we actually received the variance. We didn't consult. We simply said no, and we will consult when we feel it's ready to actually be done, because we were looking for some changes to it. So we wouldn't. So yeah, it's interesting. I'll follow that with interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
I believe that we do it different than you do then in the District of Sechelt. We do referrals out to the area just as the SCRD does. We refer it out, those come back, and then the variance comes to council and we either pass it or make recommendations or whatever it's done.
Yeah. You know, the legislation speaks to where we intend to issue a variance, so that we don't go through the process of consulting until we have the intention made by council. Yeah, so, okay, thanks.
Always good to hear how it's done differently in other places. So, all right, moving on to Annex F, Development Variance Permit DVP 00072, 5432 Iska Road and 11329 Sunshine Coast Highway. Mr. Copes.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this development variance permit application is to reduce the side parcel line setback for both lots from 1.5 meters to 0 meters to facilitate the construction of an elevated boardwalk across two properties which both have the same owner. The proposed boardwalk would connect buildings on both of the properties. According to the applicant, the proposal is the most practical way to connect the properties due to the landscape. It is not anticipated the proposal will have an impact on neighboring properties. Notifications were distributed to neighboring residents and no comments have been received. Staff recommend issuance of the permit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Having heard staff's introduction of the proposed development variance permit, if there is anybody in the webinar audience wishing to speak to the application, we ask that you raise your hand using the raise hand tool, and I will unmute you in the order of the hands raised. When you speak, I'll ask you to please give your full name and address for the record. I'll ask you to please keep your comments focused and to limit them to 3 minutes. Once the committee has heard from all those wishing to speak, we will proceed with a motion and discussion towards a recommendation to the board. So is there anybody in the attendees list who wishes to speak to this development variance permit? Please raise your hand. All right, seeing no hands up, I will turn to my directors. Directors, any questions, comments, motions? Director Lee. You're muted, Director Lee.
I will wait till Director Hiltz has a chance.
Sure, Director Hiltz.
Thank you, Director Lee. The question I have is on the natural boundary to the ocean. And this is why I get confused with the zoning bylaw 337, which says 7.5 to the natural boundary of the ocean. And I see some, it's listed as 2.0. So I can't find the 2.0 in the zoning bylaw. So if someone could help me find that, because as I read it, it's 7.5. So I'm obviously finding the wrong spot.
All right, thank you for that question. Who would like to address that setback from the water boundary? I think staff are frantically trying to find your answer there, Director Hiltz.
I did send it in advance, so yeah. So
all right, until we hear, oh, hello, Mr. Patey.
Well, thank you for the question, Chair. And I'm unmuting because when we looked into this yesterday to confirm zoning setback requirements and checking in with staff, we confirmed that the setback requirement for buildings and structures is 2 meters from the rear yard setback. I was hoping Nick would chime in if he had information about that's counter to that, but that's what we confirmed yesterday. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My understanding is that the 7.5 meter setback from the natural boundary applies to buildings, and this I do not believe is considered a building. Thank you.
Okay, so the 2.0 meters is from the rear yard regarding structures. The 7.5 is the natural boundary for buildings. Thank you. Directors, any other? Director Lee, you're next.
Thanks. That was one of my questions because roughly it's 15 feet from the, but anyways, that's a good answer. It's not a building. So I understand that. The other thing I'd like to do though is I'd like to refer this to the Area A APC. So I'd like to add that to the recommendations. And Director Ties maybe can help me with what he said last time to come back to committee.
Well, that would be the thing. So you were looking to refer this to the APC and have it returned to a future Planning and Community Development Committee.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Okay, so that you were, okay. That is your recommendation that you were moving?
Yes.
All right. Do I have a seconder for it? Okay, I see a seconder. I'm just going to sort of tag on to what Director Seegers there indicated with the last one. Is the intention for them to be informed on it or to actually provide input on it? Because again, this does run counter to the intention of the new processes.
I would like them to comment on it. It's quite a long boardwalk, and I suspect it was probably, well, I'd like to hear what they have to say. I have a few concerns myself.
Okay, thank you. GM Hall?
Thank you, Chair. If staff could just share a thought, because a couple of times directors have made comments that by referring items, these DVPs to the APC, that it runs counter to our process improvement. And from staff's perspective, it's actually using the process improvement. Staff fully accept and appreciate, and we made this clear during the orientation sessions with our APCs and presentation to directors, that there may be cases where variances benefit from local knowledge. Sometimes that's not the case. I mean, we have seen at your table with you many minor variances that are so minor that they practically do not have any effect on anyone. And so just from staff's point of view, the decision to refer is using our process, and we respect the decision that the committee makes, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, GM Hall. I guess it is true. It just happens to be that under this new process, a couple of the first ones we see happen to be items of bigger issue for the neighbors. Director Seegers.
Thank you. The reason I mentioned that with the one for Roberts Creek is we had the proponent come. We have had no response in opposition, and the neighbor spoke in favor of it. So that's why that's the one I was questioning around process, because what we are looking to do with the revised process that planning came forward to directors with is to speed up the timeline for these to go through our process, and also to reduce staff time. I mean, at this point now, we are taking this report that came, it's going out to APC, so it has to be presented there and then come back to us. So we have extended the timeline. Yes, there are times when that needs to happen because, as you know, GM Hall, sorry, directors at our place, GM Hall indicated there are times when we do want input, but I think directors need to be careful that we're not just referring to APC because that's what we did in the past. We need to really look at each one of the applications before us on their own merit and determine whether or not that is a process that we want to do. That's all I'm drawing attention to here, and it's up to the directors as to how they want to deal with it. But I don't want us to move away from the direction that staff have put forward to us to save time and process on both sides, just because that's what we did in the past. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Director Seegers. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question for my rural directors. All those in favor of referring this to the APC? All right, that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Copes, for joining us today. Moving on to, how's everybody feeling? Should we do Annex G and then take a short break before we move into ports? I see one thumbs up. I'll go with one thumbs up. So moving on to Annex G, ALC application 60835, SCRD ALR 00013 for 437 Hugh Road. Not sure there's enough numbers in that application or that subject title, but we'll turn this over to, looks like Mr. Patey, since he is off mute.
Thank you, Chair. We've received this referral from the Agricultural Land Commission for an application that seeks retroactive approval for placed fill on ALR land in Area E based on insufficient information from the applicant provided as part of this report. Staff do not recommend support for the application as presented. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Director McMahon.
Yes, this one has been through AAC and APC, and I think the direction is clear. This is a well-known property in Area E, and so I am happy, and it is Huff Road. All the neighbors agree. There's no division of opinion on that. So I would like to move the staff recommendations on page 46.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Seconded. I mentioned it in the chat there, but I've read back addresses to residents who didn't correct me. So that's that local area knowledge thing coming out to play. So I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. Rural directors, all those in favor? All right, that's carried. Thank you very much. It is 11:04. Can we come back at 11:09 and then proceed from there? See a thumbs up? Great. See you all in 5 minutes. And welcome back, everybody, to your regularly scheduled Planning and Community Development Committee for May 20th, 2021. Moving right along to Annex H, we have the 2021 Ports Capital Plan Update. And I turn this over to GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. So this report provides information on and seeks confirmation of the 2021 SCRD Ports Capital Plan. And this, the projects that are identified here align with the grant that SCRD submitted on board direction to the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program a couple months ago. And it also includes capital repairs to the Gambier Harbor float that was damaged in a winter storm. These projects can be funded from reserves on the basis of our ongoing annual capital contributions, and that process aligns with our asset management strategy. And in order to proceed with the repairs to the Gambier Harbor float using our maintenance contractor, because that work is in the scope of that contract, authority to increase the value of that contract is required. And staff recommend that the capital plan as presented, as well as the contract amendment and financial plan amendment be approved. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that, does this mean that we are committing to all of these capital repairs regardless of whether or not we receive the grant funding?
What a great question, GM Hall.
Thank you for the question. Yes, we're committing to include them in the capital plan up to the values that are shown there. There is a note in the body of the report about the implications of not, just finding it here for clear reference, that if we if we are approved for the grant, we would actually have to amend the financial plan further to receive those funds, and it would reduce the draw on our capital reserve. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I just wanted to highlight, just before I go back to you there, Director McMahon, Director Ties did step out of the meeting. He forgot to recuse himself officially, but he has had connections with Summerhill Fine Homes in the past. He has declared them in the past, and that is why he is suddenly no longer in our meeting. So, Director McMahon.
Right. I just wanted to refresh my memory on where we are with our commitment to maintaining all of these docks on Gambier Island. Because, you know, we've had some discussion that they are becoming enormously expensive, and that we may need to prioritize what docks we are willing to maintain in the long term. So is there and we've had some preliminary discussions with Islands Trust, but where are we in the process of doing this or reviewing our docks master plan?
Thank you for the question. GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. So there isn't a project to review the docks master plan. We continue to improve our asset management plans across the organization, and ports is one area where we have a partial plan that was, as I believe it's referenced in the staff report, that was completed in, I think, 2018, and we're continually adding detail to it. And we're following board direction to work with the Squamish Nation on the future of the New Brighton dock. And on that, staff have a letter has been conveyed to the dock owner, and we continue to be in dialogue with parties on that one. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I don't see any other hands up. Director Hills.
Thanks, Chair. So the way I see it, if the board was not to go ahead with this, we would be contemplating service reductions. That's what this is, to keep the status quo service levels and with the alignment with the capital projects. And if we were not to do anything, that would result essentially in a service level reduction. And I think that's what Director McMahon is going. Are we eventually going to get to where we are reducing the number of infrastructure services? And yeah, there hasn't been any direction on how to do that or even to contemplate it. Yeah, so a service reduction if we don't do this, that would be the question.
My screen just bounced around. Go ahead, Jim Hall.
Thank you. Yes, the director is correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Is this something that we could flag for attention in the upcoming budget process to look at? Because I really do have concerns about the cost of maintaining these facilities and the design of the facilities, how maintainable they are in the face of climate change and sea level rise. So perhaps we could flag this for a discussion in the 2022 budget process.
And when you say this, Director McMahon, you're referring to a service level review, essentially?
A service level review for the ports function. Well, okay, I say that cautiously. I don't mean a full service review for the ports function. That would be a major undertaking, but at least have a discussion about how we can move forward for planning for ports.
Okay. Staff, would you like a recommendation to that effect, or are you happy to just take notes on it and revisit it?
I think, thank you, Chair. I think if the committee would like information to come forward as part of the budget or perhaps pre-budget process, that a motion would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon?
Yes, I would like to move that staff bring forward a report on the ports function as part of the pre-budget process 2022.
A report on the ports function outlining, just looking for details for staff.
Priorities and next steps for considering service levels for the ports function.
Okay, is that sufficient for staff? I see a head nod there.
Thank you.
All right. Ports is B, D, E, and F. Do I have a seconder for that? I do have a seconder for that. Thank you. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question on that recommendation. All those in favor, B, D, E, and F. Thank you. That's carried. We do have recommendations here in our report today. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. I would like to remove the recommendations as presented by staff on page 51 of Annex H.
All right. Do I have a seconder? I do have a seconder. Thank you very much. No other hands. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. That's carried. And just get Director Ties back here. So moving on to item number 11 in our agenda. This was the amended agenda item, pages 54A through 54G. So I'll find my agenda here. Sunshine Coast Community Solar Association Partnership Agreement, and turn this over to Raf Shea, Manager for Sustainable Development.
Thank you, Chair. The board asked staff to work with the Sunshine Coast Community Solar Association to explore partnership opportunities to conduct SCRD facility energy studies. So staff have done so with the support of the Manager, Purchasing and Risk Management. And the purpose of this report is to outline the partnership opportunity, and staff recommends the delegated authorities be authorized to sign the partnership agreement. Thank you. Staff would be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you very much. Director McMahon.
I'm just would like to say that I'm delighted to see this moving forward. It looks like a good agreement. I will admit, given the time it arrived, I haven't read it through for every comma. And but you know, if there's any really minor amendments, we could catch that when it goes to board. So I'm very happy with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, a question about the liability to the regional district, like work site coverage, worker protection procedures. This is, electrical, working on roofs and stuff like that. How do the other participants, non-SCRD people, are they covered by, how are they covered in case of workplace injury and the liability to the regional district?
That's a great question. Who would like to, Mr. Shea? Oh, sorry, GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. So it's, staff understand that the Solar Association has that worked out as their end of the bargain. The piece that is noted in the report is that often with these partnership agreements, organizations exchange insurance, and just because of the capacity and the structure, I guess, of the Solar Association, they're not in a position to do that insurance exchange. And so from our point of view, we want to ensure that we are managing the risks of having someone on our site that attach to our facilities, and so that's what's referenced in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Follow up, Director Hiltz.
So a follow up. The visitors on site would follow the SCRD safe work procedures. Then that would be the assumption.
And I'm seeing a head nod from GM Hall.
Yes, confirmed.
Thank you. Directors, any further questions? Otherwise, I would look for somebody to move some recommendations for me, or a recommendation for me. Director McMahon.
Yes, I would like to move the recommendations on page 54A.
Great, and I have a seconder for that. A couple of seconders, since this is voting all, so us municipal directors get to participate finally. And I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? All right, that's carried. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Mr. Shea, for bringing that report to us. Moving on to Annex I, excuse me, we're gonna look at Annex I, and then we'll look at the APC minutes. So Annex I, is there anything to bring forward from that? Staff noted that recommendation 3 in here is looking for us to do an advertising process to recruit new volunteers for the AAC. So Director McMahon.
Yes, having attended the meeting, they would like to get a few new members to fill vacancies. So I would be happy to move recommendation 3 on page 56.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for that? Seconded. Thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I wonder when we're going to have a conversation about this actual committee. The Agricultural Advisory Committee was set up because we didn't have anything as a voice for agriculture on the Sunshine Coast. Since then, the Farmers Institute has started up. We've got One Straw. So I guess what I'm wondering is, what is the role of the Agriculture Advisory Committee? And is it something that should continue? And I mean, we're looking at putting more members on there. What is their role? That'd be my question. Thank you.
Director McMahon, you were really quick to raise your hand. Did you want to speak to this issue or answer this question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I do. There are indeed a number of agriculture-related organizations on the coast. They provide a diversity of opinions. I think you would get into stormy waters if you were to appoint one of those to be our official referral agency. The future of this committee, I think we need to have a broader conversation about our advisory committees in general. So I wouldn't want to single this one out. And I do look forward to that conversation because it's there have been issues with the committees over the years, and I think we need to look at them a little more seriously. But in the meantime, we have an AAC.
Thank you, Director McMahon. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I just was hoping that it is on the radar and that that's something that we will look at going forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question on that recommendation. Rural Planning Services, A, B, D, E, and F. All those in favor? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. Was there anything else from AAC minutes that anybody wanted to flag or discuss before we move on to our APC minutes? I don't see any hands. So looking at annexes J, K, L, and M, are there anything from the APC minutes that anybody would like to bring up or discuss? I do have a highlight for area E, but Director Ties raised his hand first. So Director Ties.
Yeah, well, I cut you off with my raising hand, but yeah, recommendations 3 to 6 on the area EAPC minutes, I think needs a board discussion.
All right, Director McMahon.
Yeah, personally, I am about to, I'm not quite here yet, move recommendations 3 and 6 from the area E minutes. That's page 63, 64. Recommendations 4 and 5 merit a broader conversation in a different venue, I think. We're not ready to go there at this point. But recommendation number 3, that the APC be consulted on all subdivision applications of 4 or more lots, I think is critical. There's 3 upcoming subdivisions in my area that are very important to the community, and they're all smaller than 8 hectares. And number 6, with number 6, I would suggest that all of the APCs receive an automated notification of provincial referrals, because that way, staff can get out of the way and just give the information to the community, and then the community can go and give feedback through the provincial portal, and that will work really well. But we need the notification process. So I'm happy to have a broader conversation with the directors.
Thank you, Director McMahon. I just had a question for staff regarding recommendation 6. Do we have capacity to send capability to send automated notifications, or would they would have to be forwarded from staff? Mr. Patey.
Thank you for the question. We are working on a development applications portal that we hope to be able to launch in the coming months. And that will be similar to the portal that the city of Nanaimo has, which is called What's Building in My Neighborhood. I would encourage anybody to have a look at it. It's wonderful. In advance of the implementation of that app, staff are working towards creating a monthly list of provincial referrals to be distributed to the directors and their APCs. And we're striving to have something like that in place in the coming weeks. So that will be a staff generated list that we will manage and send out to directors. Thank you.
Okay, so recommendation 6 is sort of already in the works. GM Hall?
Just to answer your specific question, Chair, this would not be automated. This would be manual and a relay from the decision-making agency, the province. Thanks.
Thank you. So sort of recommendation 6 is on the way, but the technology doesn't exist yet to automate it, but other notification processes are being planned. Director Ties?
Yeah, thank you. These recommendations, I think, merit larger discussion for all the rural areas and not just Area E. I think I would be in favor of those recommendations as well, but also acknowledging that this creates larger workload on staff. So I wonder if we should have a larger discussion around these recommendations for all the rural areas, or whether at this point we should just maybe refer this to staff and to give us some feedback as to how much of a burden this would be.
Thank you, Director Ties. Director McMahon.
Well, I'd like to start with recommendation 6, which is the most straightforward, and perhaps reword it to say, to ask, move that staff send notifications to the directors of provincial referrals that are pertinent to our areas. And then, we can fine tune it later, whether it's automated or not automated, or whether staff directly pass it on to the APCs or directors pass it on to the APCs. But we need to get these provincial referrals. It's not realistic to expect our APCs to camp out on the provincial government website looking for public consultations on all kinds of things. Does that seem reasonable?
Do you mean to tell me, Director McMahon, that you don't camp out on the provincial referral website waiting to find stuff to send to your APCs?
No.
Thank you. Just, I guess, to staff, would that be sufficient at this time to sort of set that process in motion, and we can look at fine-tuning it later as things work or don't? GM Hall?
Yeah, I hit the buzzer faster than Manager Patey. Yes, thank you, Chair. That aligns with what we already have in the works. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's a motion, Director McMahon. Perfect. Do I have a seconder for that from Rural Planning? Seconded. Thank you. Director Lee?
Thank you, Chair. Just see if I understand the recommendation. Is it directors and APCs that are to get this list? I'd hate to be in the middle because I'll forget to send it to my APC and they'll get me. So
well, Director McMahon's recommendation was to send to the directors, so they're going to get you, Director Lee.
Can I make an amendment that we send it to the APCs and the directors?
The question, yeah, I mean, do we want staff to be sending it to every member of the APC or just the chair of the APC for further distribution? I'll just ask since you're making the amendment, Director Lee.
I would think to the chair would be fine.
So you'd like to move an amendment that the chair of the APC for each area also be included in the notification?
Yes.
Okay. And I see a seconder for that. Anybody wanting to speak to that amendment? You don't see any hands, so I'll call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? All right, that's carried. Thank you very much. So we do have an amended motion. Anybody wanting to speak to the amended motion? Seeing no hands, I'll call the question on the amended motion. All those in favor? All right, that's carried. Thank you very much. Director McMahon, anything else from your APC minutes that you want to discuss?
Yeah, recommendation 3 to me is key. As I said, we have 3 really important subdivision applications that are in the works right now in our area, and I've had a large degree of public concern. I've been peppered with emails lately about a couple of, basically some of the very last sizable unsubdivided properties in the area have been purchased and are up for subdivision, and there's a lot of community concern about it. So we want to see it at APC. We definitely do. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Okay. I'm going to ask the other rural directors for their opinions on this, because the start of the next page is a continuation of that recommendation that it be implemented in the planning and procedure bylaw number 522. So without referencing the bylaw specifically, I ask if directors would want this to apply to all areas, or if we're just going to leave area E hanging out on their own. Director Ties.
Yeah, I personally would like to add area D. There's very few lots that will have that size of 10 or larger, unless you're going up the hill. So I think 4 is probably a good minimum for area D.
Director Lee?
Yes, ditto what Director Ties just said. I'd like area A added as well.
All right. Director Pratt?
Yes, area B as well, please.
Yeah. And Director Hiltz?
Yes, for consistency. Yes.
Okay, so sounds like all the area directors are in favor of that. So Director McMahon, would you like to make a motion or a recommendation?
Yeah, where I'm hesitating here is that I hesitate to recommend. I haven't seen Bylaw 522, so this sounds like a good idea, but I've never seen it. So, what the heck? I will move recommendation 3 that the APCs be consulted on all subdivision applications for 4 or more lots, and that this recommendation be implemented into the planning and procedure bylaw number 522.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that? I do see a seconder. I'm going to ask staff directly. Is this an appropriate amendment to bylaw number 522? I should have asked that question before you moved the motion. My apologies, Director McMahon. Manager Patey?
Staff have had a chance to do a real deep dive on Bylaw 522. And if you dig into the details on 522, currently there is no requirement for 10 lots or 10 hectares subdivisions to be referred to APCs. They trigger the requirement for a public information meeting. And in cases of a land use amendment, like an amending bylaw for a subdivision of greater than 10 hectares or 10 parcels, that definitely would involve an APC because that's part of the bylaw amendment process. But just coming back to the scope of bylaw 522, there is no current provision requiring subdivisions to be referred to APCs in particular.
Okay, so then follow up. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Just adding that, of course, it's always the prerogative of the board if that's an amendment that they would like to see to solidify that process in the future moving forward.
Thank you. Then I'm going to ask just a quick follow-up. Is there a better place, should the committee choose to want to implement this somewhere else? Is there a better place for this amendment to go? Not to put you on the spot or anything. GM Hall?
Staff will consider whether there are consequential amendments to any other bylaws or to policies that attach to this. And if we hit upon some roadblock in meeting the intent here, we report back. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Lee?
Yes, I was just, I'd like to know from staff whether it's actually possible, if we're actually getting all these things to start with. And then if it is it going to be a lot of extra work or is this not a big deal?
You mean in terms of referring the subdivision of 4 or more lots to APCs?
Yes. In other words, if it's a ton of work and we got to go looking up websites or something, I'm not sure, but I'd sure like if it's something that we routinely see and it's just simply making a list and forwarding it. Yeah, I'd really like to see it.
Thank you. Manager Patey, I see you've unmuted.
Investigating the impact on different bylaws or exactly which bylaws would require an amendment in order to move forward with the board's direction would be, yes, it would be work. Preparing the amendment and going through the process would be a significant amount of effort. And I want to come back to, going back to the staff report and workshops and the rationale explained therein regarding subdivision and referrals to the APC is that the primary interest and areas of influence is around park location and connectivity of trails. Planning staff, we obviously share this concern and always work to ensure parks are appropriate and connected. But while we have limited ability and policy as it relates to subdivision approvals, future work to update or create a parks and trails master plan would go a really long way to achieving the community vision and give APCs considerable input through this process. Because in the absence of actually having policy, we on a case-by-case basis have the continual conversation about where parks should go, where trails should go. And it's in coming back to a more practical way of in the future of kind of managing how we deal with subdivisions on which we are not the approval authority. It would really position us well to have an appropriate parks and trails master plan and have some idea about moving towards it in the future.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
I certainly agree that an appropriate Parks and Trails master plan is important, and it's one of the many pieces we're missing. It's been quite the interesting experience to realize that the lack of many of these key plans is a big impediment and is causing us a lot of problems. At the same time, the last 3 key parcels in my area that have planned developments, the neighbors are hugely concerned that we get established MODI right-of-ways in these areas, because a lot of developments have been approved in my area without right-of-ways, so that we have lost connectivity, really important connectivity between neighborhoods, and we have ridiculous parks. We have parks that never, ever should have been approved by anybody in their right mind. You know, I have a park hanging off a cliff with no public access whatsoever possible, even if you could scale the cliff. So I understand neighbors' concerns. I understand our lack of tools to address them, because it's the cause of a lot of frustration in the area. But we have to do what we can, given that we lack the tools that we need. And then simultaneously, we need to somehow move forward and you know, build our plans, but build the tools for better public engagement. Right now, there is no mechanism for public feedback to go to MODI on subdivision approvals. And that's a subject of enormous concern in my area. So I would like to move forward with this, but I am happy to drop the specific provision, the specific mention of bylaw 522. If somebody wanted to, can I amend my own motion?
You sure can. An
right.
amendment to say just incorporate this into SCRD planning and procedures.
SCRD planning procedures, sure. What a brilliant amendment.
Is there a seconder for that amendment? Seconded. Thank you, Director Lee. I don't see any hands up. Just to check with GM Hall or Manager Patey, that would serve to widen that scope a little more for you, so you don't necessarily have to come back to us with roadblock issues. It can sort of come back all at once. Is that a correct understanding, GM Hall?
Yep. Thank you, Chair. All
Thank
good.
you. Director Ties?
Far be it for me to be a stickler for process, but I do wonder if this substantially changes the substance of the motion, and it actually needs to be defeated and restated as rather than amended.
That's a great question. My interpretation, which anybody on staff is welcome to correct me, is that we're simply removing a specific bylaw number reference from here. We're not grossly changing anything, but GM Hall or CAO McKinley are welcome to correct me. CAO McKinley, hit the buzzer.
Yeah, this would have been a good time for Sherry to weigh in, but I think you're probably safe, Director Toth.
Thank you. Okay. So I have an amendment on the floor. I see no further hands. I'm going to call the question on the amendment, rural directors. All those in favor? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. So I have an amended motion on the floor. Before I call the question, anybody would like to speak further to that? I see no hands. I will call the question on the amended motion. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Is there anything else from APC minutes that we need to discuss or pass recommendations on? Director Hiltz.
Not so much anything to a recommendation, but just an update of a perspective that the APC in Area F has, is that they felt that they're often sit in between the bureaucracy and the public. So, which was an interesting, I hadn't heard, it was almost like a not quite a welcome wagon into the planning process, but they felt that they were somewhere in there, which I hadn't really heard before. And it kind of touches on those customer service standards that we've been talking about. It's just something I just wanted to bring forward, that some members of the APC felt that they are part of the service delivery model of what the public pays for. So it was that's not captured in the minutes, but it was an interesting, like it's a non-civil servant group of people who deal with plain language, I guess is what they're trying to say, and it can help to bridge gaps. So it was a comment that was made. So I was just bringing that forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Hiltz. Moving on, would anybody like to do anything with Annex N, which is correspondence with regards to coexisting with carnivores? I don't see any hands up on that. So we have no new business on our agenda. However, we do have an in-camera session. So I ask for a motion that the public be excluded from attendance at the meeting in accordance with Section 90, 1D and I of the Community Charter, the security of the property of the municipality, and the receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. Moved? Seconder? Seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. That's carried. So just before we go into the closed session, we no longer have any attendees in the gallery, but have we received any questions? All right, no questions received. Does everybody need 2 minutes to secure their space? Okay.
1 minute.
1 minute? All right, we'll take 1 minute to secure our spaces. And find our closed agendas. And welcome back to our regularly scheduled Planning and Community Development Committee meeting for May 20th, 2021. Having concluded our in-camera session and with no emergency items, I look for a motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded, all those in favor? Thank you very much. We have no attendees anymore. And IT indicated previously that there were no questions. So unless something came in the last few minutes while we were in camera, we'll see you all later.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.